Welcome to part 2 of Great Photography is All in Your Head. On this week's episode of Semi-Retired, we pick up the action where we left off last week.
On the other side of that, part of my job too, covering photography at work, was I had to photograph the dead.
Oh, that's right, you did, huh?
Yeah, autopsies, body parts. We were a teaching hospital, and so often, especially babies who had died, would be photographed for teaching purposes. And so we'd have to photograph them next to a ruler so that there was sizes and stuff. And the pathologist would specify, oh, I need this to show, that to show, whatever. They would always stage whatever it was we were photographing. They always did the placement. We only photographed.
That would do a number on my head, I have to tell you.
It was something, I got used to it. I didn't have an issue. And it's funny, it's one of the things they asked me when they called me for the job interview. They said, how do you feel about photographing operations and autopsies? I said, I'm okay with that. They still hired me. I guess that was the answer they wanted.
You didn't laugh like that when they asked you the question?
No,
laugh maniacally?
No, I didn't laugh maniacally. But I remember,
I'm not sure I could have done that.
A couple weeks in, going to photograph my first autopsy. I was assisting. I was attending.
Regardless, you're there, autopsy. The body's there. Yeah, I'm not sure I could have done that.
So, very still life.
Very still life. No chance of camera blur, I guess. Well, motion blur in the subject.
Okay, so let's move on. Last photo taken on your phone. And we haven't looked. We're actually checking our phones right now.
Last photo taken on my phone. It's a photograph of my father.
Okay.
Taken here when he was up here having dinner last September. And I just thought in September, yeah.
Wow.
So that's how infrequent my photography is these days with the camera. I need to get restarted. I'm hoping that this episode actually, as I said, rekindles my interest in photography.
We're going to plan a field trip, Dave.
Yeah, I don't like photographing in the winter typically. So typically I'm quiet when it's snowy, but I'd start to look ahead to March when the snow melts and it gets warm around here and thinking, yeah, maybe 2023 will be a year I get back into photography to some extent. And the field trip will be great.
So my last photograph taken is of a croissant after it's come out of the oven. And this was meant to taunt my friends because this was Sunday. So it was meant to taunt them as to what I was having for breakfast.
I wouldn't have had you pegged as a croissant taunter, Richard.
So no, I don't post food shots to Instagram typically. I prefer eating my food. Okay, so who are your influences?
The biggest one, initially, the name came up earlier, Freeman Patterson. Why? Because he teaches photography in a non-technical way. And I was of the impression before coming across Freeman's books and his approach to photography that it was a very technical activity. It all had to do with filters and compensation ratios. It seemed very technical to me. And I was convinced that getting a photograph exposed correctly was really close to rocket science. Why did I think that? Because that seems to be the way I was taught and what I'd absorbed through the various media. Freeman would say things like, if I'm feeling lighthearted, I'll overexpose my photograph so that it conveys that and I was like, wow. And if I'm feeling moody, I'll underexpose my photograph because it conveys the way I'm feeling about the subject matter. I had to read that like 6 times. And I was like, Jesus, that's not at all what I think. Never talked about his cameras, never said what camera he was using, seemed to be able to photograph anything from a pile of garbage practically to a person in this case, effectively, and just completely turned on its head, for me anyways, what I thought about photography. And that would be my greatest influence. Other than that, a few years ago, I bought a bunch of photography books and I realized, I really love Paul Strand's stuff. I really like Eggleston, the American photographer, William Eggleston, and there's a few others. But Freeman would be the big kahuna for me.
In my case, I don't have someone ask you, so who do you follow? What photographers do you follow? I don't typically follow.
You mean like social media wise? No, I don't.
Social media wise or whatever. I have very few photography books at home. I had the whole Freeman Patterson collection. Other than that, I have a Robert Frank book.
Oh yeah,
the Americans.
It's right there on my coffee table.
Exactly. The influence for me would probably be my brother in the fact, not necessarily of the photos he took, although there are a few of his that I think are stellar. One of which he almost got killed. He was lying in the middle of the street photographing a dead squirrel or something. And he almost got run over by a car. There's a shot he took of my younger brother. He woke us up like at 2 a.m. He had an idea and he used to have a studio in the basement. We had to set up the studio and he photographed my brother half asleep with a fedora on. It's a great shot. I'm going to say he influenced me in the fact that I was exposed to photography. And so I garnered an interest in it because it was there. My godfather was also a photographer, although for the life of me, I can't remember any of his photographs. I remember slideshows he would put on, but I don't remember more than that. But it was just being around background, I think, is influenced by osmosis. And I'm not putting you down, Mike. I'm not putting you down. I'm not saying I think your influence was more in the fact that you were there photographing, and that sparked an interest in me. So I can't say, oh, I'm a big fan of Mr. Avedon or whatever. They take great photos. That typically is not my kind of photography. But if I'm going to name anyone, it'll be Henri Cartier-Bresson. I like the decisive
absolutely, sure.
Those snapshots, those captures that he does of everyday moments in life. And I like that. I love those things.
Yeah, I agree. Henri Cartier-Bresson would be another one. I'm glad you brought up the name. Again, if non-photographers, look these people up. Henri Cartier-Bresson, Freeman Patterson, great artists.
Generations apart.
Very much so, and also very different in their approach.
Okay, so Dave, we're going to move on to favorite photo you have taken.
Just one photo.
One photo, yeah. I can name 3. Okay. I'm going to go with the story of one.
Yeah, give me 3. Okay.
Okay. So this was not long after my son was born. We were living in St. Henry, and there's what we call the Sherlock Holmes Bridge. It's this old stone bridge. A train goes over it. It's all big stone blocks. My wife is going through. She's at the end of the tunnel, and I've got the Leica Digilex 2. I've got it wide open. It's at that 28, and it's a wide angle shot. My wife looks tiny at the end. The end of the tunnel is completely blown out on purpose, and it's this great shot. It's very atmospheric, where the stones are big in the front as they go smaller, and there's my wife at the end pushing the stroller, and I called it the wife at the end of the tunnel.
I've never seen that, right?
I submitted it to competition years ago. It's one of my favorite photographs. It was one of the early photos when I started shooting digital, when I went, wow, I nailed it in this shot. I didn't have to do much in camera. It was great. The framing was great. To me, the subject was great. Yeah, she's small at the end. I know what it is. If someone doesn't know she's pushing a stroller, I know, and I know it's my son, and I know it's not long after he's born.
Nice. And there was 2 others?
I have 2 others. One would be one you've probably seen, is the photograph entitled All Work and No Play Makes Jack a Dead Boy.
Yeah, I've seen that, yes.
It's a long shot down the hallway. There's a door, and there's a dead guy on the floor. You see me lying there with my arms out, and I remember placing my big watch at the time so you would see the watch. And in the back of the shot is another shot I've taken, which is of a model from a 10x10 thing.
So this was a self-timer
self-timer
thing?
Kind of thing. And I like that because I had a concept that I came up with.
Yeah.
And typically I don't come up with concepts. I'm more reactive. I had a concept in mind, and I think I got it in there's only 5 or 6 shots, and I nailed the placement. The lighting was good. There's minimal post-processing on it. The fun thing is there's a chair right by my office, and that chair was there for years. No reason. Nobody needs to come sit there. I don't know what the chair was doing there. The day after the photo was taken, the chair disappeared. So there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Really?
And that photograph did terribly. Finished 60 out of 66 photographs.
Well, yeah.
In the competition. Because typically I think the subject matter was too dark.
So you got me struggling over here, but I thought of 2. Ironically, they're going to be of people, but it's my daughters in this case. One is of my eldest daughter, taken when she was 5-6 months old. She was born in January. This is August, say 6-7 months old. On vacation, I think in Maine, although it wouldn't matter for the purpose of the photograph. And she was lying on a bed in the cottage, all kind of wrapped up in the sheets. Mm-hmm. And I stood on the mattress and pointed straight down at her, probably with my Yashica FXD quartz. That's the camera I had during those years, and snapped a vertical composition that I thought just got it. She's sort of looking at the camera. The lighting is soft, and it's just all this very monochromy tangle of white sheet with the little head sticking out the top. When I saw that, when I got it back from the processing, I was like, wow, I've produced something here that's, it's not just photograph of my daughter, but it's got real something going for it. So there's one. Another one is my younger daughter putting on makeup,
I know
and
the photo.
she's working into a makeup mirror, so there's a nice reflection thing going on. The light is great, captures a real moment. I love those 2. Other than that, now we're down to my abstract Dave photographs. Is there one that I really love above all the others? I'm going to have to cop out and say there's a few that I rotate back and forth on. I tend not to think in that terms, which is my best, if you will. I'll say, here's a bunch that I'm really proud of. Yeah. And that can change over time. Sometimes they drop off. Mm-hmm. Or I remember one that I completely forgotten. And I go, oh God, that was great. And I kind of, oh wow. I was on my Flickr stream a couple of days ago, looking way back at the beginning of it. And I was working my way up. Flickr's a website, again, for non-photographers where we can store our images. There was a couple there I thought, I don't even remember taking this photograph, but I'm really happy with it. So I downloaded it to stick it on my website. Okay, so I haven't really answered your question. No, I did. The 2 of my daughters. Those 2.
Okay. We're going to move into another topic. Title or no title?
I became a titler because of Instagram, because whenever I posted to Instagram, you could add a caption, which in effect became the title. And I made it part of my creative discipline to associate a catchy title with my photograph, something that complemented what the subject matter was or helped it. Trying to be a bit clever, I guess, in quotation marks. And I really worked at that in the sense that I didn't post until I had what I thought was a good title. So in that sense, yes. And those titles are reflected on my Flickr stream and also on my website, the same titles there. So yeah, I do. And Richard?
There's a school of thought that including a title can influence the viewer as to the story you're trying to tell with the photo.
I've heard of that school, yes.
So you'll go to an exhibit and there will be 40 photographs called Untitled 1, Untitled 2. To me, when I'm photographing something, often I'll have a story, I'll have an idea of what this is trying to portray. And I like to communicate that sometimes humorously with the title. It's not that I don't think the viewer is not going to get it, but I want them to try to see what I was trying to see. I could just say it out there and say, man, you see what you see. And that's where you have those, sometimes you'll have those scenes in movies where they're like, the photographer was trying to capture the inner moment of reality as the candlestick realized its position in the world. I'm like, it's a goddamn candlestick.
Sometimes it is just a goddamn candlestick. Photography, I would say, is an act of communication. And so I see no issue. I have no issue with pairing a few words with the image as a complement to it. I don't see that as, again, entirely optional. I mean, you want to call it photograph, 12678.6, that's fine. I've done a few untitles because I couldn't come up with anything. This is art we're talking about, and I don't think there's any laws in art.
There's no right or wrong. And I understand the idea of not titling for you to leave it open for interpretation.
I do too. Absolutely.
So you're like, well, you can make of this what you want. I'm photographing it for you. Whereas I photograph for me. I like the idea of sometimes titling it. When we come back to titles, we had this discussion years ago about photographing flowers and giving them Latin names. And I remember pushing back and saying, I understand if we were a botanist society, but we're a society of photographers. So if I see a field and I have 3 flowers in the field, maybe bowed in the wind, and I argued, what makes this photograph? Is it the fact that they are, I don't know, Rosenthalus thornificus?
Wow. I like the sound of that. Okay. Rosenthalus thornificus.
That's a flower that's out to kill you.
I'll bet.
Or 3 sisters, to me, portrays a story. So you're seeing the flowers, you're seeing what they are. By calling them 3 sisters, now you have an attachment to them. They feel related. You're telling a story. Either version is great. I prefer mine. But I like the idea of a title because now you're communicating more directly to me. We're having a conversation.
Oh, I like what you said there. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I like that.
We're communicating where it's almost more intimate instead of, I'm going to leave this, interpret it the way you want. I feel like...
Well, that was the whole documentary photography versus creative photography debate. If you're photographing for an Audubon wildlife series of books, Wildflowers of North America, it's got to be the Thornificus giganticus or whatever. I get that. And that's great because somebody has to be able to recognize it and understand what it is. And maybe it's poisonous. Don't touch it. Don't eat it, whatever. But we're more in the world of creative photography. Certainly this discussion is.
And so from there, I guess we can talk about, you talked that you do minimal post-processing, tend to get it in camera.
Yeah.
I'm sort of the same way. I tend to shoot as much as I can and then process a little bit later. If I'm going to be working on something, if I'm photographing it, whether it's for an event, even when I was at work, unless we had a quick turnaround, or if I'm producing something for myself, I would often shoot and then come back a week or 2 later to try to divorce myself from the emotional attachment I had in the moment of the photo.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So that you can come back to it a bit more objectively and say, okay, I remember what I was trying to get, but I'm not so caught up that, wow, the light was amazing. I like giving myself some time to let it percolate. Have a first view. I do that when I ask to judge a competition. I will look at it. I'll sit for 3-4 days. Probably why I'm always last minute to submit my scores. But that's why I like to let it percolate and then come back to it with a different opinion, a bit more objectively. I'm less distracted by the colors or the wow.
I'd completely forgotten that, but you're right. And we must have talked about that because I used to do that on purpose is wait a day or 2 and distance myself from that initial euphoria of creation. And then I could be a bit more objective and decide it needed this or that. But minimal post-processing for those who were really really into this. I don't use Lightroom or Photoshop. I still do my post-processing on my iPad with apps. That to me was always adequate. Again, that's just personal. That's not me evangelizing in any way, shape, or form. I photograph JPEGs, not RAW files. That's a file that, not surprisingly, has received no help from the camera to produce its appearance. I shoot JPEGs, so yes, they've had some kind of processing applied to them. I get that. And then I do whatever I do, which is minimal. That's what makes me happy. If I couldn't do that, I probably wouldn't do any photography. That's my workflow. And again, I photograph for myself like Richard. We're both complete narcissists. I get it is in that sense.
I don't care if you don't like it.
I don't care if nobody likes it. Yeah, I like it, and that's all that counts.
Yeah. This is not to discount. We know a lot of people who spend a lot of time.
No discounting.
And I see that is a craft and an art in itself too. And sometimes people who will poo-poo things and say, oh, you Photoshopped this. You know what? The old masters did it. Ansel Adams did it in his dark room. You think of the famous Moonlight over Hernandez by Ansel Adams, which was shot mid-afternoon in full sun and then was developed to have that look in the darkroom. And it is known that Ansel has over 200 versions of that specific photograph, and as his taste changed, he would develop it differently based on his changing tastes.
Completely fair ball.
He would envision what he would want to do. That was the whole thing, right? You get the idea in your head, you go out, you shoot it, and then you develop for the print later.
And like the Beatles said once, why don't we do it in the dark room? I think it was. Maybe I've screwed that up.
No, I think that was it. That was it.
Yeah, probably that was it. Yeah.
I think it was George saying that.
It must have been, yeah.
John would have just said, why don't we just do it?
Make it howl and move.
There is an artistry of working an image in post.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's utterly fascinating to see what can be done. And at the same time, it's utterly fascinating to see what can be done by people who understand their cameras and do some really great stuff in camera. There was a presenter recently at the club. She was a woman, a British English woman, does everything in camera. She did multiple exposures, but like insanely creative stuff in camera.
Nice.
Beautiful stuff. You look at it, you say, this has been Photoshopped for sure. Absolutely not. Done in camera. Beautiful stuff.
I think all things are fair in love and art. When the Impressionist painters began to produce their work in the second half of the 19th century, they were, of course, reviled by the traditional painting community who felt that their work, the work of savages. Well, no. It was just a different way of looking at the world. It was more abstract and more expressive. I feel the same way with photography. I mean, you can't discount somebody else's way of working because it's not your own. We have our ways. I have my way. I respect the other ways.
In the same way that we say all cameras are cameras, I think we need to stop saying my real camera and just say my camera. Yeah. Or it could be my other camera if you're using your interchangeable lens camera. A camera is a camera. Stop differentiating in the same way you should stop differentiating art. The monkeys are angry that the elephants took up painting. Why should they be? It's still art.
I have to think about that. Yeah, that's going to resonate in my head later tonight. What was Richard getting at in that whole monkeys elephants analogy?
It just kicked in. Last two questions.
Sure.
What gear are you currently using? And I know you're not photographing a lot these days, but what is your current gear setup? Okay,
so I've got two kits. I've got the X100S kit, which we talked about. So you're talking about a fixed lens camera that looks like an old-fashioned Leica. I happen to have the two accessory, not lenses, but accessory screw-on adapters for it. One that shortens the focal length and one that lengthens the focal length. But at the end of the day, it's a short focal length camera that's kind of old fashioned in that sense. And again, I tend to take it out. And this is going to sound really vague. Sometimes I'm in a mood for the Fuji. Small bag. I don't, no more belts, no more Delta Force gear.
No harness?
No harness. No harness. Yeah. I just have an over-the-shoulder bag, what they call a satchel. It's light, it's easy. I go out and do that. The other one, my main kit, I guess, is a Micro Four Thirds mirrorless camera made by Panasonic in this case.
It's the Lumix.
It's the Lumix, currently G85. And I love the Lumix series.
Beautiful cameras.
I love them. I find their ergonomics just make sense for me. And so for that reason, I'm sold on them. And I've got 5 or 6 lenses there. So I've got all the focal lengths covered, fixed apertures on the zooms. Never did I think I would have such a nice camera kit. So sometimes I take that with me. As a result of that, my range of photographic possibilities is expanded. Do I produce better photographs with it? No. But I produce photographs with it that I couldn't with the other cameras. So that's what I got.
I remember when the Lumix first came out, the GH1, and I bought a blue one.
I remember your blue camera.
Yeah. So
yes.
I bought a blue camera, and I remember being asked by many people, why the hell did you buy a blue camera?
One of those might have been me.
Yeah, it could have been. And people said to me, why did you buy the blue camera? I said, because I didn't really like the color of the red one, because I would have bought the red one. I said, why didn't you get the black one? It looks professional. I said, that's exactly it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I said, I wanted a camera that would put people at ease. You ever notice if you pick up a big camera and you point it at someone, people tend to freeze. They feel like they're being professionally photographed. I wanted more intimate photos, and if I was going to shoot people, I wanted people to be at ease and to think that I was holding a toy. And that's why I went with the blue camera.
Did you find that it worked?
It did work to a certain extent. I liked it. It was also, I didn't have a black camera like everyone else. It was blue. It was mine.
Right.
And it was a nice blue. So my gear I'm currently using, I've got the same thing. I've got the Fuji X100S. I don't have any of the accessory lenses for
Which
it.
is 10 years old now, believe it or not, right? The X100S? Yeah, just to say for people.
I looked at the build the other day. I think it just turned 10. I didn't have the original 100. I had bought the S. Mine is in a little dome key bag, a little brown dome key bag.
Yeah.
I keep it in there. The beauty of the Fujis is you can use the old style shutter release, cable release.
Oh, so you can.
And when I registered my camera, Fuji sent me a 2 or 3 feet long cable release, which I still have.
Thoughtful of them.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So you don't use, like most modern cameras today, you'll have a wireless remote to trigger the camera. I love the idea that it's old school. You actually screw it into the shutter.
That's right.
And then you click, and it even has the hold button so you could do a bulb.
The plunger and the hold.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my kit. Other than that, it's a series of phones, whatever phones I've had from the 4S through the 6, the 8, and now the iPhone 12. For all of them, I bought the Moment cases because the Moment cases will have a bayonet mount where the lenses are. And so you can buy the Moment lenses. Moment is a company out in Seattle. They started off by making lenses. Now they sell all kinds of gear. So they're little bayonet lenses that you kind of clip onto your camera, but they're professional grade lenses.
Do you have the Moment lenses?
I have 4 of them.
Oh, no, you do, eh?
I have 4 of them.
Yeah, okay.
So they're metal and glass, and they've got weight. So it's not like the little Olo clips. Remember those things that people clip?
I had the Olo clip, yeah.
These are glass lenses, and they typically go roughly, if you get them on sale, they're about $100 US.
And what are they doing for your focal length, the 4?
So I have the 10 times macro, which is beautiful.
Okay.
And you can snap that on.
Macro,
it's a 10 times macro. I have a fisheye, which is amazing. It's a crazy fisheye. I have the wide angle, which was the first one I bought. I have what they called the tele, which is the 60. So I got the wide, the tele, the fisheye, and the macro. Okay. The only one I'm missing, Dave, is the anamorphic.
Yeah.
And I keep waiting for a sale and a reason to pick that up. But as time goes on, I'm getting less and less interested in it. I like the idea of the aspect ratio of the anamorphic, which is very long.
Yeah, that's fun, eh?
What's nice is the lens flares or light flares are horizontal because of the
right.
The shape of the lens. That's what they use when you watch movies.
Yeah.
Movies are shot with anamorphic lenses, and so you get that flat.
Well,
thing.
I have one for my iPhone. It's intended for film, but obviously it can be used, or for video rather. Clearly it could be used for still. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So I bought it like a year ago and I haven't used it at all.
So the beauty of those 4 lenses, they will fit inside a lens case. So I have a lens case that came with, I think they were a pair of Oakley glasses.
Yeah.
And so the lens case is metal covered in material or whatever. The lenses come with lens caps that are magnetic.
Oh, nice.
And so they kind of hold on to the bottom of the case. So I can get the 4 lenses into my glasses case, slip that into the bag with my Fuji, and now I've got 2 camera systems, 4 lenses, plus I have 2 lenses on my camera. I got more lenses for my phone than I do for the Fuji because I don't have a lens for the Fuji.
There is something to be said for that kind of kit. Just small, light,
fits
inobtrusive.
And I have the camera strap I can put on my phone. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll put the camera strap on my phone. I'll take the glasses case, stick it in my pocket. I'm walking around with 6 lenses.
And are you shooting with it through a particular app at the moment or just the native app on the iPhone?
Typically through the native app on the iPhone. It's simply because you can get to it so fast, right? It's a swipe, it's a click, you're there. You can map the other camera to your main screen. But this one, I can just wake the phone up and then long press on the camera and boop, it pops up. I wish they let you customize that you could use any app you want.
Yeah.
And in the past, I've used things like Camera Plus.
Yeah, I use Pro Camera.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mind you, I think that the controls that made those apps attractive 5 or 6 years ago are now on the native app, I think. Like exposure control is there, I think.
They are.
Aspect ratio choices, all that stuff.
Yeah, they are. And also the engine in your phones have gotten so good that we don't necessarily need the ability to split out focus and aperture because the cameras were not that great in the early versions of the phone. So you kind of had to play with that a bit more.
Yes.
And I find today the camera app is so good. You're not going to get as much control as going with something like Pro Camera or Camera Plus or any of the other great apps. Halide is another good one.
Never heard of that one.
So I don't feel the necessity for that kind of thing.
Shockingly, when I think about it, my iPhoneography memories are dating from 10 years ago. It's been that long since except for the occasional snapshot, since I took out my iPhone with the intention of producing photography, that's freaking me out now as I talk about it.
Maybe we should challenge each other for once a month.
Yeah.
Come up with a challenge to take take one photo each, and then we can discuss it as part of one of our regular podcasts. We'll have a segment.
I'm up for that because I do miss it, and it's not unusual for me to drop out of photography for periods of time. That seems to happen to me. Yeah. You may have heard me complaining about it 10 years ago. I do remember, as my current period was drawing to a close, thinking, I don't know what to photograph anymore. I can recall this particular autumn, I was going out every weekend, and I just remember thinking, I'm out of ideas. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm producing stuff that doesn't feel fresh because I know what happens to me. I start to force compositions on things. Yeah. It's like, okay, if I stick this here and stick that there, I'm going to get it. And they're not good anymore. At the other end of the spectrum, when I'm, again, in my opinion, because I do this for myself, when I'm photographing well, it's like no effort at all. They're like all around me. I'm like, oh, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. And I feel this little sense of the scene clicking into place in my head, almost like a little, like a detent on a switch. It's like a little click. That's the shot. Because the other thing with me, we didn't talk about this, I'll throw it in as we get to the end, is I don't take a lot of photographs. Mm-hmm. It's rare for me to come back from, say, a 3 or 4, like a half day, I don't know, go to Old Montreal, and I'll come back with 25, 30 exposures. Mm-hmm. I just don't photograph a lot. I never did. I know it doesn't cost any money now and I could just whatever, but I don't. I'm careful about what I photograph. I don't tend to do the bracketing anymore. I can see the result on the screen, so I'm not guessing anymore. So I look at it, I go, yeah, that's probably needs like minus 2/3 or plus 1/3. I shoot it. I got it. Maybe I say, nah, I'll do another one at whatever. And that's it. I don't produce a lot, which makes my post-processing easier. I do know that a lot of people like to shoot a lot. If I came back from a day's shooting and I had like 500 exposures to go through, I know I wouldn't. It wouldn't work for me.
Yeah, I would cry too. I would cry. I also am not a spray photographer where you go in and you know. Yeah. I understand the need for those kind of things when you're shooting nature, you're shooting birds in flight, motion.
Sports.
For the kind of stuff I typically shoot, the shadow most of the time doesn't move.
Yeah, right. Not going anywhere, right? Yeah.
I might do a couple. I might try a vertical and a horizontal and say, okay, I've got it, you know?
Yeah, I'd be very boring to watch doing photography. You probably think there's a guy over there who appears to have fallen asleep in that bed of flowers. Yeah. And that would be me.
You often hear the expression of working the shot, right? So you're taking a shot, work it. I find myself working the shot before I take it.
I know what you're saying.
Or, you know, as opposed to taking one shot, looking at it on the back, going, oh, maybe I should move. I find I will often hold the camera up many times before I'll actually take a shot. Yeah. And often when I'm walking with my wife, I'll have the camera up and I'll get down on a knee. I'll start composing. I'll do this, walk away. She goes, how was it? I go, I didn't take it.
Yeah.
The shot wasn't there.
You abandoned the composition, right?
I'd rather abandon than come home with images that I'm going to have to delete later or go, what was I thinking here? I
hope our similarities here aren't too boring, listenership, but it's true. I know what you mean. I'll be sitting there going, you know what, there's no shot here. And again, because I'm not photographing a Sasquatch rumbling through the woods here on the West Island, it doesn't really matter that I didn't take the shot.
Okay, so we'll close out with the dream question. What gear would you buy instantly if money was no object? I have 3 I would probably think of. One is something that I would use because it might advance things. And the other ones might be things that I lust after as objects of desire that I may not use. I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough.
Would you like me to go first?
Lust away.
So if it was something I would use, I think I would go Fuji. I would get another Fuji. But this time I think I might go medium format. Some of their 50 or 100.
So bigger sensor, right?
Bigger sensor, yeah, exactly. Because I love the idea of the bigger format. I don't really need it. I'm not producing commercial work, but I like the idea of that because I've always had an attraction to medium format. The other thing I would love to get my hands on is a good old Rolly TLR. I had one years ago.
A film camera.
Yeah, a film camera. An old Rolleiflex twin lens camera. I had one years ago. I sold it off. I'd love to get another one just because I think it's a beautiful camera. The other film camera I would love is a Leica R8, which is
I know what that is. I know what that is, yeah.
You could hammer nails all day at the construction site and then go out photographing with it. It's just, to me, it's just a handcrafted piece of brass, especially in black. It's just such a beautiful object. Put a 50 millimeter on there. Love it.
I hear you.
Of course, if I bought the Fuji, I would end up buying lenses. Damn it, I'm right back where I am. Scratch. I'll take the X100V.
Yes.
I'll take the new version of the X100 instead.
Yes.
Scratch the other one. Dave?
I'll be boring here. I'm completely happy with my 2-camera setup. I don't feel like I'm missing any features. I don't need more pixels. I don't need faster autofocus in my case. I don't this and this and that. I could go on for years. But if I had to, I guess I would flip out the Lumix body that I've got right now, the G85, for whatever the most current one is. Not before trying it out, though. to make sure they hadn't fucked up something I really like, because I'm completely happy with what I have. Viewfinder, the whole thing, it's bright, it's fast. On the Fuji side, I like that camera so much as an object and as a creative tool that, maybe the latest version of that. Again, on the assumption it would fit my 2 screw-on accessory lenses, which I've never used.
I think it does.
Okay, so there you go. So that takes that off the table.
You've never used them?
Maybe once or twice, but I bought them at a time when I had maybe more money than sense, and I'm glad I've got them. But minimally did I use them, but they're there, and they make me feel like suddenly I'm Henri Cartier-Bresson when I carry around the Fuji. So maybe I'd update that too, because I'm sure whatever the latest version is has a faster or a more fluid LED. Probably there's more dynamic range and all that stuff. Again, and I guess this gets back to our philosophies. What do we need? 20 stops of dynamic range? I don't know if that's what's necessary. Somebody said somewhere a few years ago, I forget where I read this, that one of the things that makes photography is the fact that the camera sensors in the films are not the same as our human eyes. That their ability to sense light, their dynamic range is narrower than our eyeballs. And so we get beautiful things like silhouettes. We don't see silhouettes looking around. Maybe you do. I don't see silhouettes looking around. I love a silhouette photograph. But I imagine if I had 30 stops of dynamic range on my camera, I wouldn't get silhouettes anymore, perhaps. And I don't want that. I do like the fact that what the sensor or the film is producing is not a complete carbon copy of what my eyeball sees. In that gap is for me, a lot of the beauty of photography. And I won't want to lose that.
The camera is your paintbrush.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, the camera is my paintbrush.
But no objet d'art, Dave? A little objet on the shelf, like a little bit like your brownie is not an old beat up, the brass showing of like a 1975 Nikon F that went to Vietnam. All the brass is showing through, just to have there as a sort of homage.
I'm starting to feel it. Maybe. I guess if anything, maybe a classic Leica.
Okay.
A World War II era Leica kind of thing that landed on the beaches with the guys on D-Day. Something like that as an objet d'art. I don't tend to be sort of a lover of old cameras in that way. I like my Hymatic 7S, which has a classic mid-60s Japanese look to it, but it's because I've had it. I've owned it my whole life, so I like it. I mean, I don't use it anymore. That's it for me.
You think we could ask Elon to go with SpaceX to go to the moon and bring back some of the Hasselblads that they left on the moon?
They left some Hasselblads up there?
Yeah,
that wouldn't be a bad idea. Quiet these days is Elon, I've noticed.
Well, he's trying to decide how to bring back those Hasselblads.
I suppose, yeah.
It has to be that.
That was daily news for 6 weeks? And I'm delighted that we're not hearing much from Mr. Musk anymore.
So I guess we'll close that out.
I hope those of you who aren't photographers are still with us. And I'm hoping at the same time that those who are stuck with us because they really enjoyed the discussion.
And if you enjoyed the discussion and you want to add to what was there, leave some comments wherever you're listening to. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever, leave some comments there. If you're listening to this on YouTube, leave us some comments there.
Better yet, subscribe to our channel.
That would be good too.
It's free and is good for your health.
Is it free, Dave?
It's free and it's good for you.
Oh, I believe it makes you smile when you hit the subscribe, right?
Well, it makes us smile at any rate because we get a little notification. A new episode every Tuesday and a soundbite on Friday, so you'll never be bored again.
Yeah. When you do this, both of us smile.
That's right. Yeah. So think about that.
All right, Dave. See you next week.
All right. Have a great week.